The wind howled around the skeletal fingers of the ancient cypress trees, a mournful song that seemed to seep into the very marrow of my bones. It was a night like any other in the isolated village of Oakhaven, a place where shadows clung longer than they should, and the rustling of leaves could easily be mistaken for whispered secrets. But this night was different. This night, the silence that usually blanketed the woods was fractured by a sound that chilled the blood, a guttural, echoing shriek that seemed to tear through the fabric of reality itself. It was a sound no sane creature should make, a sound that spoke of unimaginable terror and primal hunger. My name is Elias Thorne, and I was the reluctant keeper of Oakhaven's history, its lore, its whispers of the uncanny. The village itself was a forgotten relic, nestled deep within a valley shrouded by mist and superstition. The houses, built from rough-hewn timber and thatched roofs, huddled together as if for warmth against the encroaching wilderness. Life here was simple, dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the hushed warnings passed down through generations. We were a small community, tightly knit, and any stranger was met with wary eyes and a palpable sense of unease. The shriek that night had come from the direction of Blackwood Forest, a place locals avoided after sundown, even in daylight if they were wise. It was a dense, untamed expanse where ancient oaks and gnarled pines stood sentinel, their branches intertwined like skeletal arms reaching for the sky. Legends spoke of things that dwelled within its depths, creatures that predated man, things with a taste for the unwary. The shriek was followed by a frantic commotion. Dogs barked incessantly, their barks laced with a fear that transcended mere territorial aggression. Lamps flickered to life in the windows of the village homes, casting nervous, dancing shadows. A few brave souls, or perhaps foolish ones, emerged from their dwellings, their faces pale and etched with alarm. Among them was Silas, the village elder, his beard as white as the winter snow and his eyes as sharp as a hawk's. Beside him stood Martha, her strong hands never far from the handle of her sturdy broom. And then there was me, Elias, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. What was that? Martha's voice was a strained whisper, barely audible above the agitated yapping of the dogs. Silas, ever the stoic, squinted towards the dark maw of Blackwood Forest. Something unnatural. His voice, usually a deep rumble, was now laced with a tremor I had never heard before. The next day dawned gray and heavy, the usual cheerful chirping of birds replaced by an unsettling quiet. A search party was quickly organized. Silas, Martha, and a handful of the village's strongest men, armed with pitchforks and hastily sharpened axes, ventured into the forbidden woods. I, armed with a worn leather-bound journal and a quill pen, followed, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a nagging sense of dread. As we delved deeper into Blackwood, the air grew colder, heavier. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting the forest floor in an eternal twilight. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of our boots on fallen leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The dogs, usually eager trackers, whimpered and pressed themselves against their owner's legs, their tails tucked between their hindquarters. We found the first sign near the old hermit's cabin, a dilapidated structure long abandoned. A patch of ground was disturbed, as if something massive had thrashed about violently. Scattered amongst the upturned earth were fragments of torn cloth, dark and stained. Not just torn, but shredded, as if by immense, powerful claws. Then we saw it, a single, enormous footprint pressed deep into the mud, unlike any of us had ever seen. It was too large to be a bear, too oddly shaped to be a wolf. It was roughly humanoid, grotesquely distorted, with what looked like 3 massive clawed toes. A collective gasp rippled through the group. Fear, raw and visceral, began to take hold. Silas knelt, his weathered fingers tracing the edge of the print. By the gods, he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. It's real. The search continued, a grim procession deeper into the heart of the forest. The signs of struggle became more frequent, more horrifying. More torn clothing, more disturbing footprints, and then the unmistakable metallic tang of blood. It was a trail of terror, leading us further into the unknown. We found a clearing, a place where the trees seemed to part grudgingly, allowing a sliver of weak sunlight to illuminate the scene. And there, laid out as if on a macabre altar, were the remains. It wasn't the work of an animal, not in the way we understood animals. This was something else. The remains were mangled, torn apart with a savage ferocity that defied explanation. What remained was beyond recognition, a horrifying testament to the power and savagery of the creature that had committed such an atrocity. A wave of nausea washed over me. Even the most hardened men among us turned away, their faces contorted with horror and disbelief. The dogs began to howl again, a mournful, keening sound that echoed the despair in our hearts. Silas, despite the grimness of the scene, remained resolute. He scanned the surrounding trees, his eyes narrowed. "It's still here," he muttered, his hand tightening on his pitchfork. "It's watching us." Panic began to set in. The primal instinct for survival screamed at us to flee, to get as far away from this place as possible. But the memory of the shriek, the horror of the discovery, held us rooted to the spot. As we stood there, frozen by fear, a low growl emanated from the dense undergrowth. It was a sound that vibrated deep within our chests, a sound of pure, unadulterated menace. The trees rustled violently, though there was no discernible wind. A shadow detached itself from the gloom, moving with an unnatural speed and grace. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form obscured by the dim light and the dense foliage. It moved on two legs, but its gait was not entirely human. Its limbs seemed too long, too gangly, and its body was hunched, as if perpetually coiled to strike. A faint, sickly sweet odor filled the air, a smell of decay, and something else, something utterly alien. The creature emerged fully into the clearing. My breath hitched in my throat. It was a nightmare made flesh. Its skin was a mottled grayish green, stretched taut over a frame of knotted muscle. Its head was disproportionately large, dominated by a gaping maw filled with rows of jagged needle-like teeth. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were small, beady, and glowed with a malevolent crimson light. Its hands, or what served as hands, ended in long, wickedly sharp claws, stained dark with what we all knew was blood. The men fumbled with their rudimentary weapons, their hands trembling. Silas, surprisingly, remained calm, his gaze locked on the monstrous entity. "Stay calm," he rasped, his voice strained but firm. "Don't break formation." The creature let out another guttural growl, its head tilting as if in curiosity. It took a step forward, its massive claws scraping against the damp earth. The dogs erupted in a frenzy of barking and snarling, a desperate attempt to ward off the unimaginable threat. Then it lunged. The ensuing chaos was a blur of primal terror. The creature moved with an on-speed that was terrifying, its long limbs covering ground in leaps that defied physics. We scattered, a herd of panicked prey. I saw one of the men, a young farmer named Thomas, try to fend off the attack with his axe. The creature's claw sliced through the makeshift weapon as if it were straw, and Thomas was no more. His screams were abruptly cut short, a chilling testament to the creature's power. We ran as if the hounds of hell themselves were at our heels, the sounds of the hunt echoing through the trees. The creature's roars of triumph and rage spurred us on, pushing us beyond our limits. I remember tripping, falling, the cold, damp earth beneath my cheek. I heard the rustling of leaves, the snap of branches getting closer. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the attack never came. Instead, I heard Silas's voice, a sharp, urgent command. "Elias, get up, now!" I opened my eyes. The creature was there, its monstrous form silhouetted against the dim light. But it wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, towards the edge of the clearing. And then I saw them, figures emerging from the shadows. They were human, or at least they looked human, but there was something profoundly unsettling about them. Their movements were fluid, almost too graceful, and their faces were impassive, devoid of emotion. They wore simple, homespun clothes and carried no weapons. Yet, as they moved towards the creature, it hesitated. Its menacing posture softened, replaced by something akin to deference. The creature let out a low chittering sound, a series of clicks and whistles that were utterly alien. One of the figures, a woman with long, dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold an ancient wisdom, stepped forward. She spoke, her voice soft, melodic, and incomprehensible. The creature responded with more of its strange sounds. I watched, mesmerized, as this bizarre negotiation unfolded. The woman gestured towards the creature, then towards the forest. The creature seemed to understand. It let out another, less menacing growl, and then, with a final, lingering look at the ravaged clearing, it turned and melted back into the dense undergrowth, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The figures remained for a moment longer, their impassive gazes sweeping over the remaining villagers. Then, as silently as they had arrived, they too vanished into the trees. We stumbled back to Oakhaven, a broken, traumatized remnant of the search party. We spoke of what we had seen, of the monster and the enigmatic figures who had seemingly controlled it. The village was thrown into a state of terrified disbelief. Some called it a curse, others a delusion born of fear. But the evidence, the torn bodies, the monstrous footprints, spoke a truth too horrific to ignore. The creature was never seen again. The disappearances in the surrounding hamlets, which had been attributed to wolves or bears, ceased. A fragile peace returned to Oakhaven, but it was a peace tainted by the memory of what lurked in Blackwood Forest. I spent years poring over ancient texts, researching local folklore, trying to make sense of what had happened. I spoke to the oldest villagers, those who remembered hushed tales of beings from beyond the veil, of pacts made in ancient times. And slowly, piecing together fragmented whispers and cryptic clues, a new understanding began to form. The creature, the so-called monster, was not a mindless beast driven by primal hunger. It was a guardian, a protector of Blackwood Forest, bound by an ancient pact to a lineage of humans who lived in harmony with the wild. These were the figures I had seen, the enigmatic keepers of the woods. They were not demons or angels, but something in between, beings who understood the delicate balance of nature and the creatures that inhabited it. The creature's ferocity, the horrific mangling of the victims, was not an act of random savagery. It was a desperate attempt to protect its territory, to drive away those who trespassed and threatened the sanctity of the forest. The victims, it turned out, were not just innocent villagers. They were poachers, men who had ventured deep into Blackwood with the intent to exploit its resources, to hunt its rare creatures, to disturb its ancient slumber. The enigmatic figures were the descendants of a hidden community, people who had chosen to live apart from the modern world, preserving the old ways, acting as intermediaries between the wild and the human world. They had intervened that night not to save the poachers, but to restore order, to calm the guardian, and to ensure the continued secrecy of their existence and the well-being of the forest. So, was it a monster eating people? Or was it a tragic misunderstanding, a clash between two worlds that could not comprehend each other? The truth, I suspect, lies somewhere in the shadows, in the hushed whispers of Blackwood Forest. The creature was real, its hunger undeniable, but its actions were not born of pure malice, but of a fierce primal instinct to protect what it held sacred. And the enigma of the figures who commanded it, who moved with such unsettling grace and spoke in whispers of the wind, remains a haunting testament to the mysteries that still lie hidden in the forgotten corners of our world, where the wild and the uncanny dance in perpetual twilight. The fear that gripped Oakhaven that night was real, the terror palpable. But perhaps, just perhaps, the true horror lay not in the creature itself, but in our own inability to understand it, to see beyond our preconceived notions of monsters and prey, and to recognize the ancient, untamed forces that still hold sway over the deepest, darkest parts of our world. And as I write this, the wind outside my window still howls, a mournful reminder of the secrets that Blackwood Forest guards, and the chilling possibility that sometimes the scariest stories are not just tales, but echoes of a reality we are not quite ready to face.